Hey, Yetta, why do people think you're a mermaid?
I love the answer to this one because I have a great love for the depths and a huge fear for shallow living and shallow conversation.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward together with the Decker team.
We are excited that for over 30 years, we've been able to come alongside you, not only selling and buying and investing in real estate over 3,117 times, but coming alongside you to build your fun, to build your faith, to build your finances, and even strengthen, heal, and flourish inside of relationships. So really 30 years of building your life, your home, and your wealth. And so what we're going to discover this time, I love the discovery journey. It's kind of like, I feel like the Discovery Channel sometimes, that growing a relationship, deepening a relationship, developing a relationship actually takes depth. And we're going to consider what the different types of depths are, because I, for one, would not necessarily have determined that depth was created from working alongside somebody. Right? So you talk to that because it's you.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a male thing. Working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, going on a trip with my son. We don't have to talk a lot. Just be with each other side by side, live an experience. That builds a depth of relationship. Or guys, I found I've volunteered assisting, a widow or, fixing their house, and a bunch of us guys get together and side it or change a window or whatever we're going to do. That builds depth of relationship. And sometimes we don't talk much.
Well, in depth, I do
Except
believe
go
that.
Get me the hammer and can you help me move this piece of plywood?
Right. So depth, I often think about as shared experience.
Yeah, and that's a shared experience.
Right. I get it. So I'm agreeing with you, even though I wasn't quite catching it at first.
You're now empathizing with me?
Empathizing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I think about a friend, if I'm going to go see where she used to grow up or where she lived or go somewhere that's important to them, there's that shared knowing. So I'm going to, even if you can't experience all the same stuff, just the shared knowing creates a depth. Because when
Candace experienced that with your father,
right,
when they went to Europe together last year, he said, "Oh, we don't need to go here." And she goes, No, I want to see your hometown. And when they went there, he was pointing out, where he got his first job, where he got his second job, where he used to live, and where he'd walk from one place to the school. And she just ate it up, and it built a relationship so tight that trip that they came home and got matching tattoos.
I know. It's very cute. Faith, hope, and love on their same ankle by the same tattoo artist. And Candace has no tattoos until this one.
Yeah.
And her grandfather has a couple. But it created a depth, not that he actually probably talked that much, but there was that shared experience and her being able to see life through his eyes. So seeing life through somebody else's eyes or what they have, I was going to say endured. Sometimes it's endured and sometimes it's things that they've enjoyed. It doesn't really seem to matter. It still builds a depth.
Yeah. And another way that depth is built is when you travel alongside somebody because you're committed, even though maybe they're emotionally a wreck right now because they're, they lost a loved one or their romantic relationship broke up or whatever the case may be. They might be going through financial difficulty or lost a job. And when you're committed and you stay with them and you spend time with them and you empathize with them, that builds depth of relationship.
Absolutely, it does.
It's a ride or die.
Yeah. And the other thing that does, which is where my brain usually goes first and foremost.
Yeah, let's go there now.
Well, we can, because we've covered some that would be less considered depth maybe.
For you.
And yet are every bit as much depth.
Oh, are you validating?
Yes, I'm
nice.
validating.
I love
you.
it.
Is the depth of conversation. Like, what are you willing to talk about. Rather than having lots of topics off limits, being able to go deep on what's going on in your heart, like that heart connection, that's depth. But it could also be depth in relation to a topic that you're interested in and they're interested in. And so you get
or they
depth.
have mastery in, or they're developing that thought. They're thought leaders, or
Right.
they're really growing in a certain area, and you have either expertise in that area or desire as well. So it
Right.
creates that.
Right. And if you're thinking, you know what, I want to hear more about what you guys are saying, then LifeX actually is what you're going to want to get a hold of as soon as it comes out, which it isn't out yet, but it's coming soon. So send us an email at together@deckerteam.com and say, LifeX, please. And it's kind of fun, right? You can't, and I think fun also creates a depth. Like if it's all just serious and harsh and
Yeah.
you lose something in the depth, because emotional energy, so we'll say laughter and lightheartedness and fun, actually creates a depth in of its own because of the emotional connection.
Yeah. Another way of building that depth is being interested in the other person. I remember our coach, Joe Stumpf, he was telling us about how to build a relationship. And he was saying, he and a friend were in a lounge of a hotel. They were on a business trip, and they decided to test out their theory
Right.
of being interested in someone. So
Rather than interesting.
yes,
And that's what he kept saying. Rather than me being interesting,
Yeah.
I'm just going to be interested.
yes. And so they picked two ladies that were seated by themselves, and they were both married. They had no interest in picking up these ladies, but they did want to test their theory. So they went over and they started asking them questions about them, where they worked, what they did, what their hobbies were, what their family was like, everything.
What mattered to them.
And
They
then-
talked about dreams. They talked about pretty deep
went
stuff.
deep.
They went deep fast.
Yeah. And then every time the lady said, "Oh, well, tell us about you," and they would go, "Oh, we're not really interesting, but what about this?" And they kept going and going and asking and asking. And
In a nice non-confrontational way,
but in
right?
the end, conversational way. In the end, the women said, "You guys are the most interesting men we've ever met."
And they knew nothing about them. So they have no idea whether they were interesting or not. But because they showed their level of interest in them, it had that feeling emerge for them.
Right. So that can build depth of relationship and new relationship by being a great question asker. And that's one of the things you are, Yetta. You are an
Sometimes.
amazing question asker.
And yet the thing I have to be careful for is not to make it sound like an interrogation.
Yeah.
Like back off, make it slower, gentler, and then be interested in the person. Right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So without commitment, commitment is one of those things that you must have to be able to go deep in a relationship, because without that, you just can't.
No. So growing a relationship requires the 3 keys. We'll look at them again. Time,
Frequency,
frequency, and depth.
depth. And we're honored to be your advocates on this journey of building wealth through real estate and living a life exponential.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward